Deep breath. You know what's haunting about old barns? They whisper, they hold stories in their bones, stories of callous hands. Early mornings when the world was still silver with frost, and families who built their entire lives around the land. But here's what most people don't realize. Those whispers don't have to fade into memory. They can become something else entirely. Something that makes your heart skip when you first walk through the door. Welcome to the world where industrial grit meets impossible elegance. Where rust-kissed metal beams stand shoulder to shoulder with reclaimed wood that remembers 100 years of seasons. This isn't just architecture. This is resurrection. And it's called brick and beam fusion barndominium design. Now, I know what you're thinking. Barndominium. That word alone conjures up images of pole barns with living quarters tacked on, right? Maybe some corrugated metal, concrete floors, and a space that feels more workshop than home. But what if I told you that the most sophisticated designers in the country are taking that concept and turning it into something that would make a New York loft jealous? What if raw industrial beauty and warm, lived-in comfort weren't opposites but soulmates? Because that's exactly what's happening. And once you understand why, you'll never look at living spaces the same way again. Let's start with the bones. Every great story needs a strong foundation, and in brick and beam fusion design, the structure itself becomes the protagonist. Imagine walking into a space where 30-foot ceilings soar above you, held up by massive wooden beams, not the kind you buy at a lumber yard, but the kind that were hand-hewn from old tobacco barns in Kentucky, or dismantled from century-old factories in Pennsylvania. These beams have texture. They have scars. They have splits and nail holes and weathering that tell you they've lived. But here's where it gets interesting. Those ancient wooden beams aren't alone. They're joined by raw steel-thick, industrial I-beams powder-coated in matte black or left to develop their own patina. And when these two materials come together, something magical happens. The warmth of the wood softens the industrial edge of the steel. The strength of the steel makes the wood feel even more organic, even more alive. They need each other. They complete each other. And suddenly, you're standing in a space that feels both ancient and modern, both rugged and refined. This is the alchemy of brick and beam fusion. It's not about choosing between rustic and contemporary. It's about understanding that the most powerful design happens in the tension between opposites. Now, let's talk about the walls. Because in traditional architecture, walls are just walls, right? They separate spaces. They provide privacy. They're painted white or beige, and they mostly disappear into the background. But in brick and beam fusion barndominiums, walls become monuments. They become texture. They become art. Picture this. One entire wall of your living space is exposed brick. Not the fake brick veneer you see in strip malls, but real brick reclaimed from old factories or warehouses. Each one slightly different in color, some with mortar still clinging to their edges, others smooth and worn from decades of hands brushing past them. The color palette ranges from deep burgundy to dusty orange to almost purple in certain lights. And here's the thing about brick: it breathes. It changes throughout the day as the light shifts. Morning sun makes it glow amber. Evening light turns it into something moody, almost brooding. But that's just one wall. Turn your head, and you might see floor-to-ceiling windows, massive black-framed steel windows that industrial buildings used to use, the kind with multiple panes divided by slim metal frames. These windows don't just let in light. They frame the outside world like a living painting. And because barndominium designs often sit on larger plots of land, what you're framing isn't your neighbor's house. It's sky. It's field. It's trees that change with the seasons. Your walls become portals. And then there's the third wall. This one might be clad in reclaimed wood planks, each one a different width, some dark walnut, some bleached oak, arranged in a pattern that feels both random and intentional. The wood adds warmth where the brick adds weight, and together they create a layered complexity that makes you want to just sit and look around for hours. This is what separates brick and beam fusion from ordinary design. Every surface has a story. Every material has a history. Nothing feels generic or mass-produced. It's like living inside a carefully curated collection of moments rescued from time. But let's go deeper. Because the real genius of this design philosophy isn't just in the materials. It's in the spaces between them. It's in how they interact with light and shadow and the negative space that makes you feel both cozy and free at the same time. In a brick and beam fusion barndominium, you might have an open concept that spans thousands of square feet, but it never feels cold or cavernous. Why? Because the designers understand zones. They create intimate moments within the larger space, using strategic placement of those massive beams, which naturally divide areas without walls. Maybe the kitchen sits under a cluster of reclaimed wood beams that drop lower than the rest, creating a sheltered feeling even though you can see clear across to the living area. Maybe the dining space is defined by a brick accent wall that extends only 8 feet, giving you separation without isolation. And the lighting now. The lighting is where this design philosophy really shows its soul. Forget your standard overhead fixtures. In brick and beam fusion, lighting becomes sculpture. Edison bulbs hang from industrial metal pendants suspended by aircraft cable. From those towering ceilings, maybe there's a chandelier made from repurposed iron wheels and old pulleys. Wall sconces with exposed bulbs cast dramatic shadows across that textured brick. And when night falls, the space transforms into something almost theatrical. Those beams cast long shadows. The brick glows warm, the steel catches glints of light, and suddenly your home feels like the most interesting place in the world. The flooring choice matters too, because it's the foundation that either ties everything together or breaks the spell. Polished concrete is a popular choice, smooth enough to feel refined, but left with subtle imperfections and a slightly industrial sheen that echoes the steel beams overhead. Or maybe wide plank hardwood, deliberately distressed, laid in patterns that add visual interest. Some designers even incorporate sections of old brick laid in herringbone patterns to create transition zones between spaces. Every step you take has texture. Every surface rewards closer inspection. But here's what really gets me about brick and beam fusion barndominiums. They force you to live differently. They change how you interact with your space. Because when you're surrounded by materials this substantial, this real, you can't help but slow down. You notice things. The way morning light hits that brick wall at a certain angle. The shadow pattern those beams create at sunset. The way sound behaves in high ceilings with multiple textures absorbed by the wood, reflected by the brick, creating this perfect acoustic balance that makes conversations feel intimate even in vast spaces. And there's something deeply human about being surrounded by materials that show their age, their history, their imperfections. It gives you permission to be imperfect too. In a world of Instagram perfect white minimalism, brick and beam fusion says, character matters more than perfection. Authenticity matters more than trends. Depth matters more than polish. The kitchen in these spaces deserves its own chapter. Imagine a massive island, not some prefab thing from a big box store, but a custom piece made from reclaimed wood, sealed but showing every knot and grain pattern, topped with honed concrete or thick butcher block. Above it, maybe a pot rack made from old iron piping or a custom steel frame holding copper cookware. The cabinets might be flat front style in matte black or deep charcoal, perfectly modern, but paired with open shelving made from those same reclaimed beams used in the ceiling. You've got state-of-the-art appliances tucked into the setting that feels like it's been there for generations. It's the perfect marriage of old soul and new technology. Bathrooms become sanctuaries. Picture a master bath where one wall is exposed brick, aged and beautiful, juxtaposed against sleek modern fixtures of freestanding soaking tub with clean lines. Maybe matte black hardware, concrete or stone countertops. There might be a massive mirror framed in reclaimed wood or industrial steel. Every element carefully chosen to honor both the rustic and the refined. These aren't spaces you rush through. They're spaces you retreat to. The bedroom spaces in a brick and beam fusion barndominium understand something crucial about rest. We sleep better when we feel connected to something solid, something real. So maybe your bedroom has one of those massive reclaimed beams running across the ceiling, so low you could almost touch it from the bed. Maybe there's a brick accent wall behind your headboard, rough and textured, painted or left raw. The juxtaposition of these heavy, anchoring materials with soft linens and warm lighting creates a cocoon effect. You feel protected. You feel grounded. You feel home. And here's where this design philosophy gets really interesting: the flexibility. Because brick and beam fusion isn't a rigid style. It's a framework, a vocabulary of materials and principles that can bend toward your personality.